The World Championship match begins today between Gukesh and Ding Liren in an already amazing, decisive game in Game 1. While most people already wrote him out, Ding Liren strikes back with a vengeance, defying all expectations and taking the victory. Let's see how he does it in today's chess video. So white begins with pawn e4. Gukesh plays pawn e4, best by test according to Bobby Fischer. And black plays e6. Now, this opening is the French defense. It's not very common at the highest level. I think there's one Super GM who plays this regularly. His name's MVL, I believe. And after pawn e6, the idea of this opening is that you give the center early on. You give the center, but the idea is we're going to break it. We're going to infiltrate his position. Because while space is generally good, especially at the lower levels, if you allow your opponent an infiltration spot, it becomes easy to get dominated. And so, let's see what happens. So in this position, black plays pawn d5, and white plays the classical line with knight c3. Black plays knight to f6, and white plays pawn to e5. The most aggressive line here, the Steinitz variation, where the white pawn is attacking the knight, grabbing that space in the center. But as I mentioned earlier, the more space you grab, the easier it is for your opponent to come and get you. So after pawn e5, we just retreat our knight to d7, nothing too special, and the opponent decides to play pawn f4, solidifying that center a little bit more. Now, this next move is very important for everyone to know. It's a pawn break. It says, hey, please take my pawn. If you take my pawn, I'm going to be very happy, because now your center is going to have one less pawn, you're going to have one less pawn in the center, and you're going to help me develop my pieces. And your dark squares are going to be very bad. And so these positions are generally very, very, very good for black. And so in this position, the opponent moved knight to d2. Now, this is a pretty rare move. You don't usually see this very often. The more common move here is just a very simple knight f3, just defending the pawn with later moves of knight d2 and pawn c3. But not too much of a difference. We're just trying to defend our d4 pawn, play pawn c3. Our bishop's going to get fianchettoed on the king side anyways. Not too much of an impact. Knight c6, putting pressure on that d4 pawn. If it's going to crack, it's going to crack very soon. But the opponent decides to play pawn c3. Gukesh defends that d4 pawn. He says, I'm not going to let you take me and destroy my center. So black says, okay, that makes a lot of sense. In these positions, you know, black is trying to destroy the center, but if that doesn't work, then we have a secondary plan. And this is very important for you guys to do in your own games if you guys are, playing French defenses, is that if your central attack doesn't work, like my favorite opening in the world, Philidor, you go for a queenside attack with pawn to a5. You're just going to say, hey, I can't break you over here, so I'm going to break you at your base. I'm going to destroy b2, then c3 is going to get destroyed, and when c3 gets destroyed, I'm going to destroy d4. These queenside attacks are one of my favorite attacks that you could ever do, and it's an attack that most people don't actually know how to defend very well. So the opponent plays knight f3, he's just developing his pieces, and we just continue pushing the pawn. We're going to get to the base. Now, in this position, the opponent decides to play bishop to e3, which is okay. But in these type of positions, well, this move is generally not recommended by the engine at this moment, but this is the move I generally like to see as white, with the idea of being very simple. I'm just going to stop your pawn from moving up, because whenever the pawn moves to a3, this disrupts our pawn structure quite a bit, and it gets really, really, really annoying. So I like pawn a3 just to stop all of black's threats, but white decides to play bishop e3, and we decide to play bishop e7, just preparing the castle in the future. It's not good to have our king so far away from castling. Now we're just one move away in case anything bad happens to us. So pawn to g4. Now, pawn g4 is an interesting move. It's a move that I personally would play, but it's not a move that is recommended by the engine. It's a move that the engine does not like at all. The point of g4 is simple. Black's attacking the queen side, and if my opponent's attacking the queen side, I should be attacking the king side. That's just simple logic and something that you guys need to do in your own games as well. So I like g4. It's trying to play pawn f5, break that center, but it's a little slow. And not only is it a little slow, it's a little weakening at the same time. This diagonal could be exploited later on, as well as the fact that there's going to be a lot of dark square weaknesses once this f5 pawn gets pushed. And we'll see if that actually impacts this game. Because after pawn to g4, we play queen to a5 again. Very dangerous threats coming in. a3 is coming in. Maybe we can take the c3 pawn in the future. And our opponent plays bishop g2. I would have preferred pawn a3 again. I really like pawn a3 for white and black. Pawn a3 just stops everything, all the silly shenanigans by our opponent. But no pawn a3. And so after bishop g2, he's trying to prepare to castle himself, and a3 strikes. And this a3 move is strong. It doesn't look very strong, but let's just say he captures. Now, captures is obviously not good from the opponent, but after the aftermath clears here, there's so many weaknesses for us to attack. It's going to be so easy for black to win in these type of positions. Like, I'm going to win a2, I'm going to win c3, I'm going to promote my pawns, and your kingside attack is so slow, it's not really getting anywhere. So I really like this a3 move. It just destroys the pawn base. It's my favorite type of positional moves, the pawn break. And so after a3, the opponent's smart. Gukesh is a very strong chess player, very good at calculating. He plays pawn to b3. And Ding Liren thinks here, he's thinking, okay, this is weak, how do we take advantage of this? And his immediate idea is to take on d4, which makes sense because the pawn can't capture back because it's pinned, which means you have to take back with one of the minor pieces. And when you take back with one of the minor pieces, for example, well, maybe we can take advantage of something. For example, if bishop captures, our knight can capture on d4, and after queen captures, a move like bishop c5 can be very dangerous for our opponent, where we have a lot of pieces just cutting through into the opponent's position, and this doesn't look great for our opponent. And if he ever decides to capture with a knight, instead of losing his dark square bishop, this has issues of queen takes c3 check. Again, this queen is very dangerous on this queen side. And lastly, if they decide to take with this guy, then bishop h4 can be very, very, very annoying. So, in this position, after pawn to b3, white decides to play, black decides to take on d4, and white plays this very nice in-between move, attacking the queen. Now, while this move is very good, there is an issue that comes with this move. And this is something that's very important for you guys to identify in your own positions. After pawn b4, white has a huge weakness after he's forced to capture back on d4. I want you guys to type in the comments. I want to see how good my viewers are at looking for weaknesses. What is a huge glaring weakness in this position that black is going to try to exploit for the rest of the game? I want you guys to think. It's not that obvious. It's not like a double pawn. So take your time and let me know in the comments below. If you're liking this video so far, leave a like. And I'll cover more Gukesh versus Ding Liren World Championship matches in the future. But for now, the weakness is this. It's the light squares, especially the c4 square. And at first glance, this doesn't seem like too big of a weakness. I mean, it's just a c4 square, who cares? But this is actually the square that's going to help Ding Liren enter Gukesh's position here. We're going to play moves like knight b6, knight c4, queen c4. And without the light square bishop on this diagonal, how's the opponent actually going to defend that square? It's going to be tough. It's going to be rough. And so immediately knight b6 is played. And Ding says, okay, I see the c4 square. That looks so good. I'm going to destroy the bishop. And in this type of position, personally, I would play a move like bishop f1 here, to be honest. Just saying, hey, if you come there, I'm going to snap you off. And generally, this is a little slow, but I really don't like it when my opponent has such amazing pieces. So I would probably play bishop f1, even though it's not like the best move by any means, but white just decides to just castle here, which is alright, of course, but it allows knight c4 to come in with a vengeance. Bishop to f2, and already look at this knight dominating this entire position. White's pieces look so scared of this black knight. And so after bishop to f2, black plays bishop d7. He says, you know what, I think it's important to develop our pieces. We can castle in the future, play rook c8, maybe attack that c3 pawn in the future. These are all very nice moves. And so the opponent plays queen e2, maybe to keep an eye on the knight, maybe. Not too sure what this queen e2 move does. I guess it supports e5 a little bit, so maybe pawn f5 can come out in the future. And now black takes on d4, and now knight takes back on d4. The reason why white cannot capture with the pawn is basically due to the fact that, this pawn is hanging. So even though we're not going to take it right away, this is something that we can put pressure on and win, because there's no pawn that can support this b4 pawn at the moment. So After captures, knight has to capture back, and as the person with less space in the center, trading off pieces is generally okay because now look how open the rest of our pieces can become. They're a lot less exposed. When you're down in space, trade off pieces makes life easy. And so after knight takes d4, black plays knight to b2, allowing our queen to attack the c3 pawn, and basically telling the opponent, hey, you better defend this. If you don't defend this, I'm going to try to win. The opponent plays queen e3. Now, something you could do if you want is you could just go back and forth. You can just go back and forth. And if you just go back and forth, you could get a draw. But Ding over here realized that his position is probably better, slightly better. And I like Ding's position as well. We have two very nice bishops. Our opponent's bishops aren't doing much. c3 is weak. b4 is weak. We have a very nice a3 pawn set up, a nice outpost on b2. What's not to like in this position? And so in this position, black plays rook to c8, saying, I want to take this pawn. And after this move, the move that is recommended is bishop to e1, defending the pawn like this. And personally, this is a move that I probably would have played, even though it's an ugly looking move. I really like to play ugly looking moves. Something you'll notice in a lot of my games is I play a lot of these maneuvers. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. But the idea here is we let out our rook, we defend the c3 pawn, and we even get a rook in the future to good squares as well. Maybe not c1, that doesn't look too good, but maybe to d1, b1, etc. in the future. However, instead of bishop e1, the move that was played was rook to c1. And this is a problem. And the reason why this is a problem is, as I mentioned earlier, it allows our queen to enter into the c4 square. This queen is dominating here. Look at this amazing light squares for our queen here. They're just so good. We're threatening to win the a2 pawn in the future once this rook disappears and knight disappears. And we also just dominating on these light squares. The opponent can't really defend them because his bishop's so far away. And so to defend them, Gukesh says, you know what? It's time. Let's do a counterattack. But this counterattack is too little, too late in this position. And it really just exposes his king side a little bit more. Because not only are the light squares weak in this position, the dark squares are awfully weak as well. Look at this. Pow, 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 pow. If our pawn was on h6, already bishop g5 would just dominate them with this very nice skewer. But we don't have that because obviously our pawn's not on h6, and playing h6 now is a little too slow. And so in this position, black decided not to capture this pawn because of rook a1, and this position's not the best for us because he's going to get his pawn back, and our biggest advantage is gone because he'll have the open a file. But instead we just played queen to d3, just saying, hey, let's offer a queen trade. And in the future, if you move your queen away, I might just take on c3 as well. Like, these are big threats here. And so in this position, Gukesh says, you know what, I don't want to trade, but he moves his queen back to e1. And in this position, you're going to see so many pieces get pushed back and black's pieces just slowly infiltrate. This is the issue with having too much space, guys. When you have space, you let your opponent to enter, to go in and do some really mean stuff to you. And the position quickly falls apart here because bishop g5, amazing bishop cutting down through the dark squares in this position. The opponent's rook moves away. He's scared. And now we play rook to c4. Look at the domination that's about to happen. He's going to castle. He's going to play rook c8. Every pawn, every piece is going to be pressured, and there's going to be no surviving. Pawn h4. But he hopes that he plays bishop h6 to trap the bishop. But Ding does not falter. Instead, he just plays bishop to f4. He says, hey, that's a weak e5 pawn you got there. Also, these are some nice dark squares I have here as well. This is looking kind of good. And so the white queen says, okay, it's time to run, queen to b1. And queen b1 is good, but now look at where your queen is. It's just, it doesn't look great. And after this move, queen to e1, well, we have a free c3 pawn. We finally infiltrated, we finally got the pawn we wanted, and we take the pawn. Rook takes back, queen takes back, and now f takes e6, threatening, some counterplay. We just captured back, if when we cast it now, we got an open f file, life is good. And now our opponent plays knight to e2, forking the queen and bishop together, but this isn't really that much of a threat because it's forcing us to do what we want. We want to win the e5 pawn. So don't mind if I do, said Ding, and he took the pawn. So knight takes f4. At least he has the bishop pair, says Gukesh. And queen takes back, and now the opponent plays queen c2. Now, in this position, yes, Ding is up 2 points. But this is still a very dangerous position. If you don't play accurately here, I can imagine a lot of people here, especially those under 2000, messing up and losing the game. Because white has a lot of counterplay in this position. Look at all of white's pieces. They're going to slowly come out. And that's going to be a little dangerous, especially since our dark square bishop is missing. And our dark square is a little bit doo-doo here. So, Ding does what everybody would do in this position. We could take the b4 pawn, but, taking the b4 pawn is a little dangerous because it allows the opponent's queen to come in. And this is one of those moves that, yes, technically black is up so much material, but his position is actually way worse because of our piece placement. All our pieces are not very good. So Ding says, you know what? I'm not going to be greedy. I'm not going to take that pawn there. I'm going to play queen c4. I'm going to threaten your a2 pawn, and I want to trade off pieces. But Gukesh knows if he trades off pieces in this position, he's absolutely cooked. There's nothing he can do to try to go for counterplay. So he just runs. He plays queen d2. When you're down in material, never trade. It's generally not good. But by running away, he gives black time to castle. And now that we've castled, this position's not too bad. There's no more problems. Our king's not weak anymore. We got the open f-file. Life is decent. Bishop to d4, allowing a trade. Threatening our knight on b2. We play knight to d3. Just saying, hey, I want to get my knight to safety. Life is good. Queen to e3. Maybe threatening queen e5 in the future. Maybe pressuring our e6 pawn a little bit. We trade off the pieces because why wouldn't we? Trading off pieces is good. And bishop takes f1. Now, this looks like a losing position now for black. I want you guys to calculate and leave another comment if you can in the comment section below. How does black get out of this problem? Because it looks like we pinned ourselves here. If we move the knight, we lose our queen. And we don't have any checks with the queen. So, did we mess up here? Are we losing? Well, the answer is no. Because we have this e5, very cool move here. Threatening to win this bishop. And if the bishop runs away, we take on g4 with check. And so, if the opponent decides to take here, then just a very simple queen takes d4. And this position is absolutely winning in the endgame. Because we're up to 2 pawns, this pawn is hanging, this pawn's on a light square. It's an easy cleanup from here. So, in this position, after pawn to e5, the opponent decides to play bishop takes e5. Now, do we take the bishop? No, obviously not. We take on g4, check. In between check, force the opponent plays bishop to g2, and we just play bishop to f5, guarding our knights, bringing our pieces in. We're even threatening bishop to e4, pinning the bishop, winning the game. So bishop goes to g3, and we play bishop to e4. King to h2, and now we play pawn h6. I love h6. h6 is one of those moves that kind of rubs it in the opponent's face that they can't do anything. And by playing pawn h6, we're stopping moves like queen g5, but most importantly, we're just stopping some back rank checkmates. I cannot believe how many people lose to back rank checkmates when they're absolutely winning. I've lost games to back rank checkmates, so this move h6 just says no. I'm not going to fall for any silly tricks. My king's going to be absolutely safe on h6. What are you going to do about it? So, bishop to h3, and we play queen to d1. Now, sneaky move. We're threatening mate in 1. You better defend against it. And the opponent plays bishop to d6, saying, hey, if you play queen h1, I will run like a chicken. Queen to c2 check. The opponent plays king to g3. And queen takes a2. We're just gobbling up the pawns. That pawn on a3 is going to be our win condition. It's going to promote. What you going to do about that? So, bishop to e6 check. King to h8. And in this position, the opponent decides to take the bishop. Oh no. Did Ding blunder? Did we lose the game here? Nah. In this position, we just have a very simple move to finish the game off. Think about it. Take a second to think. How does black get out of this problem? Every take, we're down a piece. Though technically, funnily enough, this is still slightly better for black because of that amazing pawn on a3. But that's beside the point. In this position, how do we get out of this? Well, black just plays queen f2. And after the king moves, Gukesh would lose his queen. and so he resigned in this position. An amazing game by Ding in this game over here. While everyone counted him out, he came back. An amazing game here by Ding Liren. While everyone counted him out, he showed up when it mattered most, and he destroyed Gukesh in game 1. Let me know in the comments below if you want to see more. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.